Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce you to Seema Sueko, who is a longtime friend of All Saints Church. She was born in Karachi, Pakistan, raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, and is a half Japanese, half Pakistani Muslim American. She is an actor, a director, and a playwright who pioneered consensus organizing for theater methodology. She created the Green Theater Choices Toolkit, which has been used by theaters and universities on 5 continents, and is currently engaged in research on the neuroscience of theater. As a playwright, her work has been recognized by the California State Assembly, the NAACP San Diego branch, San Diego Theater Critics Circle, Chicago Jeff Awards, and the America Theater magazine named her as one of the top 25 artists from across the country. In 2014, she joined the staff at Pasadena Playhouse as Associate Artistic Director and worked closely with our very good friend, Artistic Director Sheldon Epps. She has recently taken the position of Deputy Artistic Director at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. Seema will lead the activities of the Arena's Artistic Development Department, including the American Voices New Play Institute and other artistic efforts. She makes her Arena Stage directing debut with Lydia Diamond's Smart People in April of 2017. Seema is a truly impressive person. We are lucky to call her our friend and so honored that she's with us today. Please join me in welcoming Seema.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so very much for that lovely introduction. And it always feels so great to be here at All Saints. This is a community where in the 2.5 years that I worked at Pasadena Playhouse, I always felt welcomed, I always felt safe, and I always felt as a theater director and as a theater maker that we were together building successful communities. Through the art that I would produce and through your work here at All Saints, I felt that we had a joint mission of ensuring that we live in a society where all peoples can succeed. And so it feels like home coming back here and seeing so many wonderful, familiar and loving and compassionate faces. Thank you so much. My experience with All Saints actually began in 2014 when I served as Associate Artistic Director here, and Melissa Hayes and John Ahart organized a theater ministry to come and see my show Stop Kiss by Diana Sun, which happened to be a play about 2 women who develop a friendship and fall in love and share a kiss that is then followed by a hate crime that left one of them in the hospital. And that was the play, Stop Kiss. And I found, when I met with the theater ministry of All Saints, a great symbiotic relationship and great support for that play. And I really thank you so much for that. That support from All Saints Theater Ministry continued with the second play I directed at Pasadena Playhouse, Real Women Have Curves, which ran last fall. And that was a play, it was the first play in 10 years to be at the Pasadena Playhouse, written by a Latino or Latina playwright, featuring leading Latino or Latina characters. Again, the first play in 10 years to do that. And at the Playhouse, we were very nervous whether this would be successful in the community. And together with All Saints support, as well as a number of other community organizations, that play achieved 116% of its single ticket sales goal, and that you played a big part of making that possible. So it brings me great joy to now be here to share with you some background on the play that I am now directing at Pasadena Playhouse, and again to say thank you to you, Melissa, and the theater ministry for supporting this production. I understand a group will be coming on September 30th to see the show. So the show I'm directing is The Fantastics. It's a classic American musical written by Tom Jones with music by Harvey Schmidt. And maybe I'll pause there to find out how many of you are familiar with the Fantastics? Yes, raise your hand. Yes, it's a lot of people. What is the Fantastics about? Anybody? Family. What else? Love. Parenting. Anything else? Those are all absolutely right. There's no right or wrong answer with answering the question, what is a play about? For those who may not be familiar with it, here's a little bit of background information. So the Fantastics first premiered in New York in 1960. It has the distinction of being the longest running musical in New York. It had over 17,000 performances, closing in 2002, and then reopening in a revival in 2006. It's also had over 400 foreign productions in 69 countries. It's had productions in just about every state of the United States, and it is a thrill to be able to tackle this American classic that is beloved by so many people. The plot of the Fantastics is well, it was inspired by Edmond Rostand's Les Romanesques, the Romancers, as well as by Romeo and Juliet. And the plot in Act 1 is that we have a boy and a girl and their respective fathers, and the fathers want their children to fall in love and get married. But they know that children will never do what you ask them to do, so they create a plot by which they put up a wall between their houses and pretend to be feuding with one another. And their plot works. The kids fall in love to defy their parents. Then they're faced with the question of how do we then let them get married and end the feud. So they hire some actors and stage a fake abduction of Louisa, of the girl, and the boy becomes the hero and saves her. And that's Act 1, which is, yes, which is illusion. It's this illusion of happy ending, this illusion of perfection. So Act 2 is disillusionment, that these four characters realize this perfection maybe wasn't what I wanted. I'm not satisfied. And they start to feud again, this time for real. And the boy goes off on his journey, and the girl goes off on her journey, and they hurt each other, they experience humiliation, they experience loss and pain, and then finally, towards the end of the musical, they see one another again. And the girl really sees what Matt has been through. And she says 3 powerful words to him. She says, "I'm so sorry." And in that moment, Matt sees her seeing him. And he says, "No, it's all right. I've been foolish. I deserve it." And they make a choice in that moment to love each other deliberately, intentionally, and selflessly. So that's the story of the Fantastics. And when Sheldon Epps and I, Sheldon, the artistic director of Pasadena Playhouse, and my mentor, and I had the privilege of calling him boss for 2.5 years. When he and I were talking in January of this year about putting the Fantastics on this season, he said, "Seema, lots of people know the Fantastics. Whether they've seen it or not, they may have heard of it and have opinions about it. And some folks will say, 'Oh, how nice that you're doing the Fantastics.' And others might roll their eyes and say, 'Oh, good Lord, you're doing the Fantastics? Really? In this day and age?' So he said, you might want to think about, why is this musical necessary today? Such a great question. And that sent me down a path of really thinking about today and about this moment that we're living in. And my personal experience of today, I feel like I turn on the TV or I read the newspaper or I go on social media, and in this election year, I feel I am surrounded by hate and by anger and a polarized nation. I feel we are a nation at war with ourselves, a nation at war with one another. So if that's the today that we're living in, then more than ever, it is necessary to have this musical produced, The Fantastics, a musical where the lesson is a lesson of how to love. Not what is love, not what does love feel like, but how, after you have been hurt, humiliated, and experienced loss and pain, how do you then choose to love the person who may have caused that or been complicit in it? And so that became the foundation for this particular production of The Fantastics at Pasadena Playhouse. And you'll see that idea manifested in our scenic design. I wanted to find a physical metaphor for this moment we're living in, for a nation at war with ourselves. So when you come to the theater and you look at the stage, the set will look like an old abandoned theater that has been shuttered since 1969, that looks war-torn. There's a hole above the stage in the ceiling through which rainwater has come onto the stage and formed a puddle. There's detritus and debris all around, a scaffolding that's peeling off from the proscenium, old drapes and fabric on the floor. And that is the design that you'll see. And it's into this old, abandoned, war-torn theater that our cast of 8 actors and 2 musicians break into the theater, burst into it, compelled, as artists often are in this time of war, compelled to make art, compelled to tell this story to what for them is an imagined audience. It's an old abandoned theater. There's nobody there, but they must make this art. They must heal themselves and thus heal the audience that is there in reality, but that they conjure. There are a couple other layers of significance for this particular design choice for the Fantastics, and that is, some of you may know, the Pasadena Playhouse history, and the Playhouse was abandoned and shuttered in 1969. The organization's founder had passed away in 1960. The theater faltered along for another 9 years and couldn't make it. It went bankrupt. So both the college that was at the Pasadena Playhouse and the theater shut down in 1969. The place was padlocked and they all left. Several people worked very hard to reopen that theater. And in diving deep into this idea of a shuttered theater, I learned that the college of the theater in 1969, some of the students had got together and actually produced The Fantastics, one of the last things they had produced before everything closed down. And they produced it in the Patio Theater, which is where Red, White, and Blues, that restaurant, is now. That's where they produced it. And so as a lovely side note, the alumni of the College of Theater Arts are using The Fantastics, this production, as an opportunity for an alumni reunion, which is really great. It's the 99th year since the founding of the Pasadena Playhouse. It was founded in 1917. And so I'm thrilled that the alumni are rallying around this production. And we'll be using one of the performances as an opportunity to welcome back that cast and the director from the 1969 production. They'll join us on stage with our cast after the curtain call and sing Try to Remember together. There's also another layer of significance to this design choice, and that is that our press opening takes place on the 15th anniversary of 9/11. And I can think of no better way to commemorate and remember that day of hate than with a bold, artistic war cry for love and for a deliberate choice for each and every one of us to make for love. So that's a little bit about this particular production. As you can imagine, with this idea, I needed to get permission from the playwright to go in this direction. And so I reached out to Tom Jones, the writer, book writer and lyricist, who is a musical theater icon. I, through friends of friends, sent him an email explaining the choices I wanted to make on this production. And to my surprise, he emailed me back. We then started some phone conversations, and he said, I really like this idea, and I think I might want to do some rewrites to help support this idea, which is really exciting. He hadn't touched the musical in 40-something years, and so to want to endeavor to do some rewrites was great. He invited me to his home in Connecticut over one weekend, and we worked through the play. He came up with some new text here and there, some of which you may or may not recognize if you know the show. But one of the most significant adjustments we looked at was the number Round and Round, which takes place in the second act of the musical. It's the number when Matt goes out on his journey and Louisa is on her journey as well. I told Tom I was interested in that feeling a little darker, reflective of what a young man today might experience out in the world that can make him either lean into hate or choose love. So I said I wanted it to go in a little darker so we could understand that in today's context. And he agreed, and he said he wanted it to escalate as well. So that number will look a little new to some of you who are very familiar with the show. So going down this, doing this work on the Fantastics and this particular interpretation of the Fantastics has really got me thinking about what makes us choose love. And I wonder, are we born to love, or do we learn it? I really don't know the answer to that, and it's actually a question I struggle with all the time. But one thing that I am more and more clear on is that if we do want to live in a successful community, and if we do want to live in a society where all peoples have an opportunity to prosper and to be happy, then on a daily basis we must choose love, and we must intentionally work towards it. And so I was thrilled when Melissa shared with me the racial justice resolution that I understand you recently passed here at All Saints Church. And she shared that document with me, and as I read every word, I was inspired and motivated by this community's deliberate choice to be intentional about justice and intentional about inclusion. And so I thought I'd share with you the cast of our production of The Fantastics, because I think it's in deep alignment with your racial justice resolution. When we cast a play, any play as a director, we're always striving for excellence. We always want the best person for any role. And I feel that I have really achieved that with this cast. And as a result, it's also a cast that feels very reflective of much of the America that I live in. Our girl, the role of Louisa, is being played by Ashley Park, who is a Korean-American actor who's joining us straight from Broadway, where she played Tuptim in The King and I. Yes, our boy, Matt, is played by Connor Guzman, who is half Irish, half Mexican. Grew up right here in Pasadena, and then went on to University of Michigan to receive his bachelor's, then moved on to New York and is now back. Our El Gallo, which is the role that was originated by Jerry Orbach, is being played by an amazing Puerto Rican-American artist, Philip Anthony Rodriguez. The boy's father, Huckabee, is being played by Getty Watanabe, who is a Japanese-American actor. If you ever saw 16 Candles in the 1980s, raise your hand if you saw 16. Okay, all right, my people. So you would recognize Getty Watanabe. That's one of the first things he had done, and of course he's done a million things since then. So he plays the boy's father. The girl's father is being played by Reggie Davis, a tremendously soulful and very talented African-American actor. And then the two actors who are hired to stage the abduction of Louisa and Matt is played by Iranian-American comic genius Amir Talai, and the role of Henry, the old actor, is being played by Hal Linden, who some of you, if you ever saw Barney Miller, might remember him as Barney Miller, and also Tony winner of The Rothschilds in 1972. And of course, Hal is Jewish-American. So in striving for artistic excellence, I was able to find and build a cast that is not only excellent, but is also so reflective of the many communities, not all of the communities, but many communities that make up the America that I live in. This idea of artistic excellence and diversity, it's an idea that my field, the theater field, struggles with. There are some folks who believe that if you are pursuing excellence, you cannot pursue diversity. And of course, I reject that idea. I think they go hand in hand. But because that idea is prevalent in my field of the nonprofit American theater, here are some stats I'd like to share with you about my field. There are 74 LORT theaters across the nation. LORT, L-O-R-T, stands for League of Resident Theaters. The Pasadena Playhouse is a LORT. Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., where I now work, is a LORT. Here in Southern California, South Coast Rep, Geffen, Center Theater Group, they're all LORTs. Most major cities have at least 1, 2, or 3 LORTs. LORT also refers to the union contract that we have with the Actors Equity Association and with SDC, stage directors and choreographers, as well as USA, which is for the designers. So of these 74 LORT theaters, only 4 of them currently have artistic directors of color. Only 1 of them has an executive director or managing director of color. Only 16 of them have female artistic directors. The statistics for the actors are also similarly disheartening. The Asian American Performers Action Coalition did a research. They looked at the last 5 years of New York stages and representation on New York stages, and they found that only 13% of all the roles in New York went to African American actors, 4% to Latino actors, less than 2% to Asian American Pacific Islanders, and less than 1% to all the others. And that's today. These are current statistics. To me, these statistics are alarming for a couple of reasons. One is for the sake of the industry, the field. When any industry, any business becomes a country club, becomes only accessible and available to just one community and not all communities, it is sounding its own death knell. It's not preparing itself for long-term sustainability. So that's alarming to me. But then it's alarming to me at sort of a micro and personal level as well. I have a friend of mine who is a pastor who always says it is so important that every person feel that they are the protagonist of their own life. So think about that for a moment. Do you feel that you are the protagonist of your own life? I hope you do. And now think for a moment, there are some people who don't feel they are the protagonists of their own life. They might feel they are the villain of somebody else's life, the invisible to other people's lives, or worse. And I asked this friend of mine, this pastor, why is it important that we all see ourselves as the protagonist of our own life? And he said, for 2 reasons. One is, as the protagonist, you know the community is rooting for you. So that's nice. You feel good about yourself. But he said, even more importantly, as the protagonist of your own life, you know that your job is to contribute to the greater good. So just imagine that if we lived in a society where everyone felt they were the protagonist of their own life, and thus their action, what they needed to do on a daily basis, was contribute to the greater good. I want to live in that society where we are all contributing to the greater good. And for me, theater and its opportunity to represent voices on stage and validate them gives us this opportunity to ensure that all peoples can see themselves, can feel they are the protagonist of their own life. At Pasadena Playhouse, one of the ways we strove to achieve this was through this methodology of consensus organizing for theater. It's an artistic methodology that's rooted in a type of community organizing used in social work and in community revitalization that at its heart is about mutual self-interest. So at Pasadena Playhouse, we worked very hard to deliberately build stake in multiple pockets of communities, including the All Saints communities. And those communities then deliberately building stake back in the theater by surfacing mutual self-interest and organizing around that mutual self-interest. In the 2.5 years I was at the Pasadena Playhouse when we used this methodology, that helped us bring in over 6,500 new audience members who had never been to the Playhouse before from a diversity of communities. And we were able to engage them through partnerships, deep, robust partnerships with over 70 organizations or university classes. And just from year 1 to year 2, at least 14% of them repeated or came multiple times within the season. So going back to this question about making art in a time of war and what your role can be in that. First of all, I want to say that I feel that everybody at All Saints actively plays a role in making art in a time of war. I see all of you out in the community. I see you working very hard to strive for social justice. That is art, and that is life, and that is building a successful society, and I thank you for that. But I also want to ask you to do one other thing. And I'm going to share a couple of things that happened while I was at Pasadena Playhouse. I share them not to tell on people, but rather to invite you to help not lean into the hate, but instead make a choice of love. By my second month on the job at Pasadena Playhouse, I had heard from the executive director that one of the leading members of the board had raised concerns about me because I am a Muslim. By my third month on the job, I had heard from a development director that a board member said, "Old Pasadena would open up our wallets to Sheldon if he only stopped doing black plays." By my sixth month on the job, an audience member, right before Act 2, said rather loudly, "Where did all these colored kids come from?" in response to our New Generations program that had brought some young men to the theater. By my 8th month on the job, a development officer reported to me that she was giving a site visit to a potential donor, a donor they were chasing, who said during her site visit, "I hate all Chinese people." None of these things were said to me, so they're all hearsay. But they were flashpoints of hate that peppered my time while I was at Pasadena Playhouse. I was still able to achieve the things we achieved together because of your participation, because of the tremendous boss I had, Sheldon Epps, who said to me, when I went to him with my fears around what I was hearing, he said, "Seema, I will quote to you what Toni Morrison's famous quote, 'Racism is the problem of the racists. Let them go and fix themselves. You don't have to fix it for them.'" And he also said, until somebody has the courage to say any of those things to your face, you don't have to hear it. But they were flashpoints of hate while we were all working together to really build a community of love. And so I invite and I encourage all of you at All Saints to continue doing the work that you are doing, both here in the All Saints community, but in every place else you go, in your places of work, at other cultural institutions, at the places you volunteer, and to deliberately, intentionally, and every day choose love. And I say it to you as much as I say it to me, because for me, as I describe these flashpoints of hate, I too have been working to very much feel love in response. It's a hard choice to make, but it's an important choice to make. I wish those people who had said those things had said them to me so that I could say to them, I'm sorry you are hurting, that you feel you have to hate. How can we use our art together to deliberately build love, heal you so you do not have to hate, and so we do not spread hate elsewhere? So I thank you for being my partner in a deliberate choice for love and a deliberate choice to build a successful society together. Thank you.
So we'll now open it up to some questions for Seema.
So this is a very mundane question after a very moving talk. I'm
Good.
sorry. And I think I've heard you talk about this, but I can't remember. So the rape song, how is that being handled?
Oh, what a great question. Yes, those of you who are familiar with the Fantastics know that in the abduction scene, the song had originally been called Rape, and they would sing rape. And of course, back in 1960, that word didn't hold the same connotation and violence that it does today. And also our understanding of sexual violence has also evolved over the years. And this is why Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt, the creators of the Fantastics, are just brilliant people. Because in 2006, when they did the Broadway revival, they had heard and recognized that people were struggling, audiences were struggling with this moment in this musical when all of a sudden they are singing rather cheerily the word rape. So they have changed that. And the song is, it depends on what you pay. And instead of rape, they're singing pay. It depends on what you pay for the type of abduction that the actors can stage for Louisa. Thanks for asking that. Mm-hmm.
I want to first thank you for sharing your heart with us.
Thank you.
In your introduction, it was stated that you're looking into the neuroscience of theater, and I'd like to hear more about that in relationship to the concept of love and healing.
Oh, what a great question. So I feel that many of us who work in the theater will often say theater builds empathy. And we see it anecdotally, whether it's seeing it in actors stepping into a role, stepping into the shoes of another character, or we see it in our audience members who sometimes come out of the theater and say, oh my gosh, I went on that journey, I felt that. So I wanted to explore this question of, does theater build empathy? and started some conversations with neuroscientists looking at what is actually happening in the brain when somebody is engaged in the act of acting. And so last summer, I had a research partner from UC San Diego in the School of Psychology and the Stein Institute of Aging, and we conducted a research project looking specifically at older adults and looking at a research group that went through the process of learning how to act, and a control group that did not, and did some before and after and during surveying about what does the act of acting do to them. And what we discovered, it was a tiny research project, what we discovered was happiness, that the research group that went through learning the act of acting reportedly felt happier and had greater self-confidence and greater self-esteem. So our next steps are to try to publish this particular research, and I'm also now looking at working with other scientists because I want to get into the hard science, the functional MRI machines, the PET scans, to really understand what's going on in our brains around that. So that's a little bit about that.
Hi, my name is Alex Posner. I've been here a member all since I was 13 years old, for 13 years, and I'm 26 now. I'm a young Latino aspiring artist, and thank you so much for your presentation. This is more of really a comment. I loved how you said, let the racists deal with themselves, because I have my own bits of racism from my living on the streets and my drug and alcohol addiction, which, by the way, I'm a year sober now.
Congratulations.
So, and it's something that I'm having to deal with, and it's a healing process that I'm going through. And so thank you for your words. Thank you for your inspiration. I'm definitely coming to see your show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was intrigued with your first question, why do we love? How do we come to love? And I've never thought about acting as a form of learning that. But I'm wondering if the reason that I choose to love is that I've tried other things that just didn't work.
That's great. Yes, the other things don't work, right?
Yeah.
They're self-destructive.
And it's such a wonderful thing to learn not just to love, but to be loved.
Yes.
And to allow that to challenge me to a much more difficult task to love.
Yeah.
It's harder to love, but the rewards are just amazing. So what is it about acting that promotes that?
I think as actors, you have to deliberately step into the shoes of your character. And your character might be very much like you or completely opposite. And you have to find a way to understand the character's motivations, intention, what they really want. And I think in doing that, it helps for the actor to really, I do think it builds your empathy with others.
Does that translate off the stage?
I think it does, but I will say this. While I think the act of acting helps us learn empathy or exercise our empathy skills, I think the industry of theater or the entertainment industry does exactly the opposite. And I see talented, brilliant artists become destroyed by this industry and thus become hardened and hurtful and hateful themselves. So it's a paradox, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
On that note, I'm an actor myself, and I really appreciate the work that you've been doing with Sheldon. It's disheartening to hear that that kind of hate still goes on. But in the theater world, it's a little bit different than film and television as far as behind, getting people, the writers and everybody behind to be more diverse. How do you, I know you probably can't project for everything, but in your experiences, how do you see that going as far as theater? Because I'm really impressed with the different casting that they've been doing at Pasadena Playhouse alone. So how do you feel that is progressing?
I think along the long arc, we've made progress, but that is a long arc, and there's so much further to go. And I think the journey along the short steps is a couple steps forward and a couple steps backward. That this conversation around inclusion and representation in the theater has actually been going on for 40 years. And the statistics of 4 artistic directors of color, it was 5 last year. It will be 3 when Sheldon retires in June. So it's not a linear journey. It's a very robust conversation going on in our field at all of our TCG conferences, and I was just in San Francisco for a women's leadership conference looking at why have the numbers of women leaders in the theater not changed in the last 25 years. And I think I get alternately optimistic and sometimes very saddened by it. The conversation continues. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
One last question over here.
Yeah, I'd like to just go back to your comments about love as a decision that we make. I've had a lot of problems with just the kind of loose talk about love. There's just a lot of floating around, love this, love that, love everything. And, sort of the idea that love is the natural state. I'm not so sure about that, with all that we see going on around us, and religion has something to say about that too, the separation that is natural to us and has to be overcome. And I've been helped too from the few insights that I've had from neuroscience, that we're really dealing with a reptilian brain and a new brain,
Yeah.
And they're both inside of us. And we have to make a decision whether we're going to let the neocortex, the new brain within us, drive us, or resort to the kind of fight and flee kind of things that are native to the oldest brain in us. Anyway, those are just thoughts, and I just appreciate the fact that you're bringing up the notion that we have to decide to love. And we have options, and that decision is a very dramatic one.
Thank you for sharing. Great.
Well, that's going to be the end of our program, but I want to thank Seema for being with us again, and thank you for all the gifts that you brought Pasadena by just being you, being the wonderful you. And we are all going to see the Fantastics, right? And we all wish you the best of luck in Washington, D.C. Thank you.